قصمنا من قرية كانت ظالمة وكم قصمنا من قرية كانت ظالمة وأنشأنا بعدها قوما آخرين فلما أحسوا بأسنا إذا هم منها يركضون لا تركضوا وارجعوا إلى ما أترفتم فيه ومساكنكم لعلكم تسألون قالوا يا ويلنا إنا كنا ظالمين فما زالت تلك دعواهم حتى جعلناهم حصيدا خامدين وما خلقنا السماء والأرض وما بينهما لاعبين لو أردنا أن نتخذ لهوا لاتخذناه من لدنا إن كنا فاعلين بل نقذف بالحق على الباطل فيدمغه فإذا هو زاهق ولكم الويل مما تصفون وله من في السماوات والأرض ومن عنده لا يستكبرون عن عبادته ولا يستحسرون يسبحون الليل والنهار لا يفترون أم اتخذوا آلهة من الأرض هم ينشرون لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا فسبحان الله رب العرش عما يصفون لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Muhammad, for that absolutely beautiful Quran recitation. I really enjoyed that, alhamdulillah. Now, I just have a couple of announcements to make, inshallah. Rebirths Connect presents us with their very first ever post-Ramadan conference, which is going to take place on Saturday, May 4th, from 3 to 9 p.m. Inshallah, we're going to be having a total of about 12 speakers who are going to be very well equipped with the tools and knowledge necessary to allow us consumers to do our absolute best to maintain faith after Ramadan. Inshallah, this is not only an event for reverts, just to let everybody know. This is also going to be an event for the whole Muslim community, inshallah. Now, on the topic of Ramadan, Ramadan feedback, Mass Queens does everything in their ability to make sure that we have the best time as we possibly can, especially during Ramadan. We try to plan nice events, we try to plan nice activities. Guys, with your help and your feedback, we can make sure that we do the best by you as we possibly can. We can make sure to cater towards your demands and your needs. We can bring topics that you guys want to hear, things that you guys want to see, activities and events. So please, inshallah, feel free to leave us some feedback based on how you guys like this Ramadan to make the next one excellent. Now, a couple events for our brothers, Brothers Jiu-Jitsu. So just one correction I want to make is that Brothers Jiu-Jitsu is not going to be Tuesdays and Fridays. It's going to be on Fridays and Saturdays. It's going to be on Friday from 8:15 to 9:15 p.m. and it's going to be on Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m. Inshallah. If we have any more questions about that, please go ahead and talk to Brother Samuel. Just one more thing on that note. we have amazing instructors. We have guys who are going to teach us wrestling, grappling, everything you need to know for self-defense, inshallah. And it's a great way to build brotherhood as well. So please, inshallah, feel free to join us for Brothers Jiu-Jitsu. And the next event for the brothers is going to be the sports night and halaqah. This is going to take place every Sunday at 6 p.m. So this is not taking place tomorrow. This is going to be taking place next week. And it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to connect with wonderful brothers. And I know this is a masjid, but believe me, we got some really good comp over here. So please join us, inshallah, for the sports night and halaqah. Now, an event for the community is going to be the 7 under Allah's shade. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among these 7, which is going to take place every Friday at 7 p.m. Inshallah, this is going to be a really good opportunity to learn about how we can be among these 7. And an event catered towards the sisters is going to be our Sisters Halaqah, which is going to be every Friday at 6 p.m. Snacks and refreshments. So personally, I've never been here, so I can't say much about it, but inshallah you guys can talk amongst yourselves about how you guys like the Sisters Halaqah. Now this is really important. National Muslim Advocacy Day. Guys, so National Muslim Advocacy Day is going to take place on April 29th and April 30th at Capitol Hill. This is going to be an amazing way for us to meet with our representatives and let our representatives know exactly what we want. We as a Muslim community, we don't want our tax money and our money going to fund a genocide across the world. Please join us on National Muslim Advocacy Day to let our representatives know exactly how we feel about where our money goes and how we want it to go. And we also have a group chat known as All Out for Palestine WhatsApp group, which is Everything Palestine. If you guys are interested in protesting, volunteering, just doing everything you can to support the movement for Gaza and to end this genocide, inshallah, please join our All Out for Palestine WhatsApp group chat. We have the barcode right over there for anybody who wants to join. I'm sure we have some people in the brothers who can add people as well, inshallah. This is going to be a great way to stay up to date with everything Palestine, everything protests and encampments, inshallah. And Mass Queens presents to us, Palestine will be free. Support our youth during the solidarity, during the Gaza solidarity encampment. My brothers and sisters, our youth are soldiers right now. We are out there at the front lines in colleges, and we are battling the NYPD every single day. Across the states, across the country, our youth, our students are showing up to college campuses and showing the higher-ups exactly how we feel about what's going on in Palestine right now. And they are going through it. Inshallah, they need your support. Many of us cannot join them at the front lines, and that's okay. But it is our duty to become their backbone. It is our duty to show them that they are not alone, that our youth don't have to fight this fight alone, that our youth have us. So inshallah, please, we need many items needed. We need snacks, we need food. Please make sure it's halal, water, masks. We're going to need painkillers, female hygiene products, hygiene kits, sterile gauze, and instant cold and warm packs. If anybody can donate, please, inshallah. This is a wonderful cause to donate to. And now finally, our Mass Queens Youth Group Chat. If you guys want to stay up to date with amazing and high quality events like this, where we have highly qualified individuals to come and speak for us, please inshallah join our Mass Queens Youth Group Chat to stay up to date with all of our activities. Everything that we do here at Mass Queens Youth is going to be in this group chat as our wonderful community posts everything that we do in that chat. And for suggested donations, where we have a Zelle, a Venmo, a Cash App. For cash, the donation box is located by the registration tables, inshallah. And should I be reading the numbers? Okay. Brothers and sisters, please donate to Mass Queens Youth, inshallah. Our students and our youth in our community, every single day, where do we spend our time? With the non-Muslims, in the fitna, at school, at work. How do we recharge our faith? I, as a youth, how do I find a place to come to where I can find like-minded people, people that I love and want to be a part of? How do I find that? I find that here at Mass Queens Youth. And I promise you, the way it has allowed me to evolve my faith, inshallah, I know it has allowed many of our youth to evolve their faith. Please donate to our cause, inshallah. And now, finally, I'd like to introduce Mohammed ElShinawy. Mohammed ElShinawy is a graduate of English literature at Brooklyn College, New York City. He studied at College of Hadith at the Islamic University of Medina and is a graduate and instructor of Islamic Studies at Mishka University. He has translated major works for the International Islamic Publishing House, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, and Mishka University. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah. And may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad and his family and his companions and all those who adhere to his guidance. Only thing left after this is makeup. That's a story I'll never share publicly. So I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make this gathering a means for our betterment and bettering our profile in His eyes. And the objective of this super duper crash course is so that our faith doesn't crash. It is confidence in our faith and the bearers of our faith, because, you know, the deen and how we understand the deen and who sort of communicates to us the understandings of the deen, these can't fully be separated. And so a chink in one of those armors is an access point to sabotaging all of them sometimes. And so I pray that the very high level discussion we have tonight on the Sharia, on fiqh, terms that are very familiar in Islamic discourse, with a little bit of a deeper dive, inshallah Azza wa Jal, and the four madhabs, the four famous schools of fiqh, will be better appreciated and inshallah better trusted for those that need that, inshallah. Next slide. No, it's... So let's start with Sharia, right? Because for those that don't know any better, or those who are blinded by their prejudices, obviously not you, Sharia is like a trigger, a frightening word. It is assumed by them to be a penal code and nothing more. Sharia means hands are flying and nose are being cut and stuff like this, right? That's what Sharia, that's all Sharia is, right? A penal code. When in reality, if you were to go to any sort of book of Islamic law, the hudud, the prescribed punishments, don't account for more than like 2% of the book. And most of that 2% is about when you shouldn't be applying the hudud, right? Sort of what offsets, inhibits the hudud, or suspends their application, not suspends them. These are Allah's laws, and they are all wisdom and mercy and justice, but you err on the side of caution always with them, right? So the majority of even the 2% is not about that. And so what exactly is the Sharia? Does anyone know where the word Sharia comes from, like linguistically? Let's keep this interactive because I'm kind of sleepy. Correct. Jazakallah khairan. I think there's a next slide, if you don't mind. So, being able to know how to find water, a source of water, for a desert civilization is everything, right? Like, it's really interesting, like I shouldn't take a deep dive here, but in Arab culture, the word fawz is the word for like success. And the desert is called a mafaza, that which you succeed. Because success equals surviving the desert, knowing how to navigate it and getting out before you run out of water, before, a scorpion crawls into your shirt, something like that. Likewise, if you're not able to identify how to get to a source of water, you have nothing. And so the word Sharia meant the path to the water. Okay? That's the linguistic root of the word Sharia. And so Islam now sort of absorbs that word and calls the revelation Sharia. Why? Because the source of life in this world, and the source of life, meaning survival in the next world, the path to better living here, the path to the eternal life there, is all bent on this. Right? The ayah is one of many ayahs you can cite in this regard, when Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. Be responsive, respond to Allah and His Messenger when they invite you to that which what? Gives you life. Right? And water, obviously, is the source of life. Historically, that was like linguistically and how Islam sort of adopted it for the revelation, meaning the entirety of religion, everything Allah revealed. It was not historically only used for law. Law as we understand it today. What first comes to mind regarding law, like civil dealings and sort of transactions, and it wasn't just, it was way more than that. It was the law and sort of the ethics and the theology, even the beliefs, or everything Allah revealed. That's important. You know, Al-Imam Al-Ajurri, rahimahullah, one of the early scholars of Islam, he has a book called Kitab al-Sharia. The book is called the Book of Sharia. And it's a theology book. It's a book on creed. It's an aqidah book, right? And that's also why, you know, these disciplines like law and theology, we just subdivide them into disciplines for simplicity when you're studying. But they're not actually separate categories. Like, I believe in Islam, but I don't practice. That's the end product of taking those categories too seriously, right? There's actually no separation. The idea of a non-practicing Muslim, for instance. I'm a non-practicing Muslim. What does that mean exactly? That means I'm non-submitting submitter, right? It's an oxymoron. Like it's counterintuitive. What do you mean you believe, but that belief has sort of no implications whatsoever in your practice, right? And so it was never separated. Just keep that in mind. Sharia was about everything, the totality of Allah's revelation, even if later on it sort of got used with a particular subset of that revelation. Okay, next slide. These are what are famously called, oh my God, it's so much prettier on my laptop. It's not your fault, it's Google's fault, because they support Israel. The primary objectives of the Sharia. You commonly hear that the Sharia came to sort of protect these 5 objectives. And by the way, no time to talk about it, but it's not just protect them, it even promotes them. So right there, to guard them and to proliferate them, which is to protect religion, life, property, intellect, and family, or they call it honor, or they call it ancestry. You know, there's something to say here, which is, doesn't everybody agree on this? Like, what do we need the Sharia for? Like, every human being agrees that family is kind of important, intellect, respecting people's opinions is important, right? Like, property rights is important, like sanctity of life, murder is bad, is important, and religion, like even an atheist would agree with this stuff, by the way. He might swap the word religion with like spirituality or energy crystals or something, but everyone agrees on these 5. So what makes Sharia special? What makes Sharia special? Like, what's so special about these 5? Sharia came to protect these 5. Huh? But I'm telling you, man, even without wahi, already tells you, I'm in. I know. How to get there? It's not the water, it's the path to the water. How do you get there? How do you actually remove racism from a world without getting people's egos to submit to God? Impossible. Right? Self-worship. That's where racism comes from. That's really what it is. Right? How do you get domestic violence to stop without abolishing alcohol? Right? How do you do that? Impossible. How do you get fornication to stop? Without promoting marriage, promoting family. Yes? And so it is the system, the only system that can and has, by the way, proven itself to deliver us to what we all agree on in principle is where we want to be. Is that clear? So the Sharia is like the path to the water, without which you will not have a path. Next slide. These are now, sorry, can you go to the next slide? I think I swapped slides here. The sources of the Sharia, right? This is another sort of misfire on the formatting, but it's okay. Where do we get the Sharia from, right? So these are called the agreed upon sources of Islam. Okay? Where do we get Islam from? Quran, right? Where do we get Islam from? The Sunnah. And the Quran and the Sunnah, no Muslim would deny their authority, that they are authoritative, meaning they are binding on every Muslim. La ilaha illallah, Quran, Muhammad Rasulullah. It's like the Shahada, right? This is, and whoever differentiates between the Quran and the Sunnah is like the one that differentiates between Allah and His Messenger. In principle, you could sort of argue the hadith might mean this, or the hadith is actually a presumed hadith, its authenticity needs to be sort of contested, that's fine. But in principle, the Quran and the Sunnah are undisputable sources of the Sharia. Likewise, the ijma'. Because I'm crunching things here, let me just say there's ijma' on ijma'. Meaning, all Muslims agree that when they all agree, the truth is going to be there. Right? Because Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Whomever follows other than the path of the believers. That's impossible if they're disagreeing. But when they're agreeing, you must follow their path. Or else, to say all of the believers are wrong would mean what? At the same time, means the Quran is not clear when it says it's clear. It's a clear book, right? Kitabun Mubin. The Prophet ﷺ didn't clarify anything. He didn't know how to teach his students, alayhi salatu wassalam. That would imply his failure as well. Like, it just doesn't. So, the Quran, the Sunnah, the agreement of Muslim scholars, right? And then Qiyas is generally agreed on. Qiyas is analogy. Like, based on the Quran and Sunnah. A parallel we draw from the Quran or Sunnah, or the Ijma'. So the Prophet ﷺ made tawaf on a camel. Made tawaf on a camel. So therefore our feet don't have to touch the floor in tawaf. So technically I can make tawaf in a wheelchair, right? Or I can make tawaf on the second floor even if my feet are not touching the saha. Assalamu alaikum, ladies. Is this good? Or it's not good? You don't like it, that's why you're giving it to me. I know you. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, Suhaila. Very kind of you. What were we talking about again? Wheelchair. So, qiyas, analogy. Just by analogy, we sort of arrive at, so they're extrapolations, they're, extensions of the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ijma'. These are pretty much agreed upon. And so, I want you just to keep that in mind. That's all I want to say tonight. Can you go back now so that we don't drop that? The reason I put these here is that these are what are called al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya that are agreed upon. I'm getting all the agreed upon out the way. Okay, early. These are the legal maxims. Maxims are basically standards, rules that apply everywhere when we're talking about these five. So what are legal maxims? Basically the scholars, they all sort of like see certain rulings. I see 25 different rulings in 25 different chapters. There's a common denominator here, right? What's the common denominator? That intentions always matter. Whatever it's going to be, right? Intentions always matter. Always. Therefore, I make that a rule that applies to everything else. All scholars agree on that rule. Al-umuru bimaqasidiha, al-a'malu bin-niyat. That's a legal principle that is universal. There's no chapter in Islamic understanding, Islamic law, it doesn't apply. The second one is al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. Everywhere, right? I check. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching us. The Quran is showing us, right? That if you're certain about something, you never disregard what you're sure about for something that might be true. Right? That's a universal rule in Islam. The third one is la darar wa la dirar. There should be no harm inflicted, nor any harm sort of self-inflicted. Harm or reciprocation of harm. The no harm rule. These are my wordings, by the way, just to keep them shorthand. And then hardship warrants ease. Whenever there's a hardship, the Sharia always creates ease, right? Pray standing if you can't sitting. Fast if you're sick, later, right? There's always that rule, a built-in flexibility depending on how much difficulty. That's built in, so we extend it everywhere, right? The notion of darura, necessity, the notion of hardship, mashaqqa, that's a constant. The fifth, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. I messed up there, didn't I? So the fifth one is, who knows it? Anybody? Before I check if it's in here. Anyone know the fifth rule? الأمور بمقاصدها واليقين لا يزول بالشك والمشقة تجلب التيسير لا ضرر ولا ضرار العادة محكمة. The fifth one is that customs are binding. So if the Sharia has not said something, the revelation hasn't said something, it's been silent, Allah wasn't forgetful. He left that on purpose, right? So that the people can either stipulate. If they stipulate, then so be it, right? And if they don't stipulate, we go to the norms. So there's no rule in the ayat or a hadith about how much the bridal dowry is, right? So the woman gets to stipulate, ladies, and then he has to accept them, or else we're deadlocked. If she doesn't stipulate, let's say she became Muslim, didn't know that there's a mahr thing, and so we already got married, and so what do? We go to customs. What's the average sisters in this socioeconomic, circumstance get? That becomes binding, right? Another cool example someone gave me: you go to a steak restaurant, and you don't check the price because like you're generally well off, right? And so you just say, "Give me the wagyu, whatever," right? And you don't check the price. Then the guy comes and says, "Here's the bill. The wagyu is $200,000." You can take them, hypothetically, into Islamic court and say, absolutely not. He didn't tell me up front, and that is outside the norm. Like there's a spectrum of expensive steak. It ends at somewhere near $600, right? For this kind of neighborhood, for this kind of place, for this kind of, right? And so the custom would be binding whenever there is no sort of upfront agreement or a sharia dictating it. So customs are binding. Culture makes a difference, right? So those 5 are agreed upon. There's like a 6th one, but I don't want to talk about it, which is generally agreed upon. Applications they could disagree on, but these rules they agree on. Got it? Good. Anyone have any questions? Grr. Al-i'mal awla min al-ihmal. That's sort of operationalizing a text or a rule or an account, like a testimony, takes precedence over picking one over the other, like tarjih. I'm going to pick this one, ignore this one, because this one seems to make more sense, even though I don't really have an answer for that one, right? I just pick one over the other. Discriminate, basically, between evidences. So to reconcile between them all, to find a way to make them all coherent, takes precedence over picking one and ignoring the other. That's the idea. Any questions? I want to actually no, I'm not going to clarify anything. It's a sticky rule, but basically the easiest, it's like a sort of a nuanced rule. But the easiest examples, I have 2 ahadith. I don't actually have a way to reconcile them, and so I just pick one over the other. So the rule is I should be reconciling first. Whoever can reconcile gets first dibs over the person that sort of can make a strong argument for one, but can't account for the other. For instance. Yes. Yeah, was it 3 rak'ahs or 4 rak'ahs? It was 3 rak'ahs, unless you're OCD. I'm serious, because if you're OCD, then you're certain that you're OCD, and therefore you are to not, yeah, exactly, base it on 4. Because you know you're always doubting, right? So you lean to what is greater likelihood or certainty over the doubt. Any other questions? Always certainty over doubt. Did he leave Islam or not? Well, he said he's Muslim, then he's still Muslim, right? Am I divorced? Did it count or not? If you get hit, you reach one of those stalemates, then you're not, because the default is presumption of continuity. You're married. You know that as your asl, like that, and so on and so forth. Did I pray or not? Well, you know for certain that the prayer came in. You're obligated. You're not certain whether you've discharged the obligation, so that means you go pray. That sort of thing. It applies everywhere. Anything else? Good. Next 2, right? Okay. So let's get to now what I want to get to, which is the meaning of fiqh. So all of this was basically sharia, the revelation, and what's agreed upon in terms of sources, and what's agreed upon in terms of principles, like the legal maxims. Now let's get to fiqh itself. Next slide. Does anyone know the meaning of fiqh originally? Hold on, let me give a fair. Brother in the back. MashaAllah. So fiqh means to have a deep understanding, and sometimes the Arab use it to mean an understanding of hidden elements, like you take note of subtleties, right? And so that's another way of what he said, right? Deep understanding. You wanted to add anything, Akhi? Just that's about it? Okay. Very good. So fiqh can basically mean just understanding, comprehension, and sometimes they use it to mean your ability, your perception, your perceptiveness to note subtleties. And that's why also, let me throw a quick historical one again. Fiqh, a long time ago, didn't mean Islamic law. Fiqh meant someone that was sharp. yes, eventually it meant sharp in the deen, and then eventually it just settled on someone who is sharp at extrapolating laws in the deen. But we're getting ahead of ourselves right now. But they used to use it like that. Like even, Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, early tabi'i, met many of the Sahaba, but he wasn't a Sahabi, he wasn't a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He was an orphan raised in the house of one of his wives, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he never met him. So he was talking to a man about some issue, in the Islamic stance on some issue, and so he said to him, "Al-fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, have said otherwise." So Al-Hasan wanted to just check him a little bit, and he said to him, "Listen, have you ever met a faqih in your life?" Faqih in our head just jumps to like a scholar of law, right? A jurist, someone that has juristic competence. So he said, have you ever met a faqih in your life? A faqih is someone that is sort of disinterested in this world, aspirational towards the next world, aware of the schemes of the heart, right? Like spirituality, right? He knows shaitan's games with him. He knows his weaknesses, that right? Faqih. So I'm just showing you that the word in its linguistic usage was used widely historically. But then you have this hadith where the Prophet this hadith is, not then. This hadith is an example of the linguistic usage of the word. مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whomever Allah wishes well for, He's setting them up for success or even more success, distinction, right? He gives him fiqh in the deen. Faqiha means to be learned. Faquha means to become scholarly. And both of those are two layers of what this means. And this hadith obviously narrated by Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Bukhari and Muslim. Agreed upon means Bukhari and Muslim, by the way. Whoever's new to these whole bunch of terms tonight. I know it's a little bit of elevating the discourse tonight, raising the bar, but we want to do that every once in a while. Inshallah. Next slide. Okay. So now fiqh, used in its most common usage now, it's a term. It's a term that belongs to a particular discipline, a science. And when it's used, 99% of the time now, we're referring to this technical definition of fiqh. It has settled on this, right? Which is the Islamic rulings on practice. Which means we've removed creed, we've removed spirituality, we've removed sort of adab in general, practice, like things you do with your limbs, right? In general. Islamic rulings on practice that are derived. Derived meaning they're not explicit. They're based on sort of like a formula with which we derive. We pull from the texts. It's not crystal clear. Any person can see it. It's sort of extrapolated, derived. So they're practice that is derived from specific evidences. They're not just like general principles or anything like that. Yes, sir.
You say somebody faqihun fil qanun.
Yes.
So what's the difference between this one, faqihun fil qanun, and faqihun fi ilm al-hadith?
Nothing.
It's the same meaning.
فقيه على وزن فعيل أي تعمق أو تبحر في الفقه في الفهم. That's it. So faqih in something means deep understanding in something. Of course tonight, or any night, because this is the only training I have, I'm talking about what fiqh means in Islamic science, in the Islamic sciences, in the Islamic disciplines. Where we usually hear it in the Islamic context, it refers to al-ahkam al-amaliyya al-mustanbata min al-adilla al-tafsiliyya. That's just the textbook definition of it. What do I want to say here? What are the differences now between Sharia and fiqh? Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. Because we're doing well on time, not too bad.
Sharia be like, this is really general, but like more specific, and fiqh would be like in depth.
I think you're right. It would be my problem. I'm just sleep deprived right now. Sisters, anybody? What would be a difference? There are many, by the way. I don't see someone like you think I can see through. Pull, throw something at me, get my attention. What is it? Please do. Just don't miss.
Sharia is the content, and then fiqh is the analyzation.
Okay, so Sharia is sort of the substance itself or the content, and the fiqh is what is, how'd you put it? The analyzation. Okay. Anybody new that hasn't spoken yet? Huh?
So Sharia could be what is explicit in the Quran and the Sunnah, and then as you mentioned, the fiqh is what is derived.
Very good. So Sharia can't be wrong. Sharia is what Allah revealed. What Allah revealed can't be wrong. Right? And fiqh is Sharia if it's right. You get it? Fiqh can be wrong. And this is what I want you to appreciate. There's something very beautiful here. It was the great imams of fiqh, of like derived Islamic law, that chose to settle on the word fiqh as if to say to the world, by the way, this is my understanding. You see, subhanAllah, their piety, to highlight, because like when it's my understanding, I don't say this is God's. That's why like when you talk about like the madhabs, the schools of fiqh, you're not going to say like pork is haram in X madhab or in the 4 madhabs. It's not a madhab. It's not an understanding. It's sort of an absolute, an undeniable, a definitive, right? You don't say backbiting is haram in fiqh or in this madhab or that madhab or according to those madhab. No, backbiting is haram, period. Right? But when it came to the things that could be wrong, they put the primer, the disclaimer that this is fiqh. So if it's wrong, if we find out it's wrong, it's from fallible human beings, whereas the Sharia remains infallible. By the way, we will never know. Right? When it comes to valid opinions in fiqh, they can't all be right. They're all valid, right? We're going to get to the definition of valid. But let's say they're all valid. I can't know which one is right, but I know they can't all be right. Doesn't matter. In the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, from the perspective of Allah, there's only one opinion. That is correct. But for us, we say they're all valid. If they're coming from the right places, through the right methodology, they're all valid. And they call them fiqh because we can never get to the bottom of which one of them, for certain, is the Sharia. Right? This is why, subhanAllah, great Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he used to say that I have believed in Allah and what has come from Allah as intended by Allah. Because you don't always know what was intended by something. Some things yes, some things no. He said, I have believed in the Messenger of Allah and everything that has ever come from the Messenger of Allah as it was intended by the Messenger of Allah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So obviously everyone's got to do their best. If you're a scholar, you got to do your best to work through the detailed evidences. If you're not a scholar, you still got to do your best. That's what Allah's going to ask you about, to find the right scholar, to get your question answered. Everyone's got to do their best. After you do your best, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not burden you beyond your capacity. You don't need to be right on all issues because that would make you a prophet. Okay? If you think you're a prophet, then you got a way bigger problem than whatever issue we're talking about. We're debating right now. Next slide, inshallah. So I need to stop here. Some of the great wisdom behind the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal kept certain things definitive, Sharia, right? And some things speculative, meaning potentially Sharia, but I'm not exactly sure. Fiqh. Definitive, speculative. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب. He is the one who sent upon you, O Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, O Prophet of Allah, the book. منه آيات محكمات. In this book, out of this book, some verses are muhkamat. They're definitive. هن أم الكتاب. And these definitive verses, wherever they are in the Quran, they are the foundation. They are the reference point. They are the anchor of the book. That's what everything goes back to. They are the referee for everything else. And they are what everyone must settle on, the anchor, right? When no one's allowed to, they are the foundation of the book. وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٍ. And I have made certain verses in the book, mutashabih. Shabaha means to resemble. So they resemble each other. They both look like they could be right. I can't say conclusively, definitively which one is right. Right? Shabah is resemblance. Then he says, أَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. And as for those in whose hearts is perversion, here it says deviance, they follow the speculative from it. Meaning they selectively read the book to make it sound like whatever they want it to sound like at the expense of the stuff that is crystal clear. The definitive stuff, right? That some people is a sign of the deviance of the hearts. Okay. Some ground rules. How do we define definitive? How do we know what is the definitive part of the book? How do we know what's clear? So we got the Quran, every single verse in the Quran is going to be sort of definitive or speculative. How do we know what's definitive? How do we know what's speculative? It cannot be understood any other way. How do we know what can't be understood any other way? Like, how do I know? Should I do it? That Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is not about the Trinity. I'm going to get sort of colorful now. I'm getting you to work your muscle. Obviously, it can never mean that. I actually heard a Christian missionary say that it can mean that. Who's got one for me? Yellow. Okay. Okay. But okay, I'm gonna accept it. Sister, go ahead. Give me a rule, big rule. I was just using that as an example to give me a rule. How do we know it can't mean that? I'll give you guys one more chance. Yeah, there's no way all of the Sahaba were wrong. Right? So what is agreed upon by the scholars equals definitive. Okay? If the scholars have ever agreed on something, sometimes the agreement can happen later. But once they agree, Allah would never leave this ummah in darkness for a moment. The truth would have to arise. Have to. If it was wrong, someone would have got up and clarified. Somebody. Doesn't have to be the majority. But the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تزال طائفة من أمتي على الحق ظاهرين. There will always be a group of my ummah upon the truth apparent. They have to be visible. ظاهرين, ظاهر, right? So they would have clarified. If nobody clarified, then the Prophet ﷺ broke his promise. Right? And the Quran was not saying the truth. Just hypothetical, right? When it said it's clear, it's a clear book. Right? And so, therefore, definitive equals agreed upon by the scholars. Now, yes, ma'am. Yes, sister. Yeah.
There's a lot of but that the extension of the tawaf in Mecca is haram because it's outside the vicinity.
Yeah.
So ما زال هيدي المجموعة ظالمين هل هن معهم حق ولا لا؟ سوري معهم
لا ما في إشكال. Let us just finish the categorization. Definitive equals agreed upon by the scholars. Speculative equals what? Not agreed upon by the scholars. Right? The proof that it's not clear, that the scholars didn't agree. Right? On its interpretation. On its interpretation. So now, bring it here to the ayah. There's 3 layers to this ayah I want you to keep in mind. Layer number 1, when something is unanimously agreed upon. It's not up for discussion. Right? So, if the Tawheed example, it's not up for discussion. Whether I can actually deconstruct, see through your logic, supposed logic, or it's irrelevant. There's a big difference between knowing the truth and knowing what is wrong with the criticism against the truth. You get it? Big difference. You don't need to have the ability to sort of refute every charge made against your truth, or else you'll never actually arrive at anything. You're always going to be dependent on having a response to every creative criticism someone brings you about anything. Right? And so if something's unanimously agreed upon, it's over. Like, by the way, grammatically and linguistically, the people that say there was a prophet after the Prophet Muhammad, A'udhu Billah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they cite sort of like, there's a little bit of linguistic gymnastics they play with the ayah of Khatam al-Nabiyyin, the seal of the prophets. They say seal is like, the ring sort of like the decor, because the last thing you put on your clothes is the ring. And so like he is like the most celebrated. Doesn't mean necessarily he's the last. Doesn't mean seal like you seal an envelope. And that linguistically is one of the usages of the word seal, right? But why am I not willing to entertain? Why do I not need a degree in sort of classical, rhetorical, conventions to refute? I don't care. You're telling me all the Sahaba were wrong? When the false prophets arose after his death, sallallahu, and they all agreed that this guy is deviant. You tell me all the Sahaba were wrong? That means he sallallahu didn't sort of even raise them on the first pillar of Islam? I'm not willing to accept that, right? When someone comes, here we go, rabbit hole. When someone tells me, the salah linguistically means sila. Sila means connection. So long as you have some connection with God, some spirituality, you don't have to pray the 5. So like you can pray 3 and do yoga for 2 or something, right? I'm sorry, it is not up for discussion. Why? Because the scholars are agreed on it. So you're taking the word salah, which is speculative, but the scholars agreed on it, which removed it into definitive, and you're trying to do what? يَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. You're trying to sort of like pursue what you claim is unclear at the expense of what is clear. Sure. We're saying Bismillah here. We haven't even started yet. Yalla Bismillah. Tfadal. We're just revving up. We're going to accelerate, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن
It's recording the lecture. It's a microphone. Here. Give this to Abed. There we go.
حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Okay. Go ahead. If I don't finish, we're fighting. I'm going to tell you now.
I think there's some things now that are, they've always been definitive, but are now being debated on.
Yeah.
Libas haram, it's always been, but if you live in America, you can't really escape it, so it's okay.
Later. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrespect you really. I'm just trying to be a little bit funny here, but I really don't have the bandwidth. And I'm trying to give you tools with which you can, inshallah, answer an unlimited number of questions in this regard, right? So the first layer of this is that when something is unanimously agreed upon, it's over. Nobody can contest it, no matter how big a scholar. And just as a short answer, there is no scholar in this day and age that says riba is fine now. Okay? They may sort of like tell you there's an exemption. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. Just telling you no one would say ahallallahu al-riba, right? And if they did, the ijma' would disqualify their view, right? Because once they agree on something, it's over, right? Okay. The second layer to this is regarding scholarly views that are not agreed upon, okay? That's going to depend on what? Who you are. If you are a layman, this is your test, the great wisdom of why Allah could have very easily made everything in Islam definitive, right? Quran would have probably been about 6 million verses, not 6,000. But for a great wisdom, He chose to make some definitive and some speculative. Of that wisdom is to test the layman. Okay? Will you be dismissive of other scholarly views when, to be honest, you don't even know how they even got to their views? Right? That's a test of your humility. You know, like, I'll give you an example. Where can you spend your zakah money? There's 8 categories. Okay? There's 8 categories. One of the 8 categories is fi sabilillah. Okay? Fi sabilillah, even if we're going to restrict ourselves to the 4 madhabs, the 4 famous schools of Islamic law, right? We're going to get to the 4 madhabs in a second. They don't agree on what fi sabilillah means. And so now you're going to come along and say, it's crystal clear, it's jihad, you can't spend it on anything else. Right? And I've seen people say this all the time. And they get upset when sort of zakah is being spent on a masjid or sort of like a da'wah project or otherwise. If it were crystal clear, would is Abu Hanifa a traitor, rahimahullah, or was he ignorant? Which of the two? A'udhu billah, but either, right? Was Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, a traitor, or was he sort of ignorant? You don't even know that they included other than physical military combat in that fi sabilillah you can spend on the jihad of Quranic instruction, or the jihad of da'wah, or the jihad of Hajj and Umrah. You know why they said that before you sort of made fun of it? Because when Aisha radiallahu anha, Imam Ahmad for example, was asked by his wife, do women have to perform jihad, like fighting? Do we have to fight the way the men fight? Are we obligated with jihad? He said, yes, jihadun la qitala fi. You are obligated with a jihad that does not involve physical combat, al-hajj wal-umrah. So Imam Ahmad said you can spend zakah money on someone who wants to make hajj and umrah, because the Prophet ﷺ called it jihad. I'm not even disagreeing that it's for jihad, but you just have a limited understanding of jihad. That's what he would say, for instance, right? I'm not saying you have to agree with him, but don't you dare be dismissive, as if he got it from his head, or as if you even know to begin with where he got it from, right? It's a test for every layman now. Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, when he said you can spend zakah money towards the jihad of promoting the Quran, he will tell you the very first usage of the word jihad in the Quran was regarding the jihad of not letting them silence you when you're saying the Quran, right? وَجَاهِدُهُمْ بِهِ. Allah said, and this was at a time when fighting, even defending yourself, even self-defense was haram in the earliest period. Allah said, and fight them with it, meaning with they're trying to try to silence, don't let them. Fight them with it. Keep making sure people hear it. And then he called it jihad and kabira. Fight them with it, a great jihad. So he said, sort of to promote Quranic instruction, Quranic competition, you can spend from zakah money, fi sabilillah. Right? Just an example. If you're a layman, you have no right whatsoever to dismiss, the views of scholars when the issue is not agreed upon. Got it? There's also another beautiful benefit here. For the scholar himself, when there is a disagreement, and his research delivers him to a certain conclusion, he's actually not allowed to agree with his teachers anymore. He can't be cultish about it. It's for the scholar, right? And that's not always the easiest thing in the world, right? Because there's status involved, there's group membership involved, peer pressure, guilting, all of that applies to not just children, but adults and scholars and everyone, right? And so yeah, some of the great wisdoms, right? How hard are you going to try to study? How hard are you going to try to get the right answer? Whomever is right gets a double reward. Whoever is wrong still gets a reward, the hadith says, and all of that. These are of the wisdoms of why Allah left some of it speculative. Is this clear? Imam al-Khuraqi and others, they say, if Allah wanted to make this deen entirely definitive, مَا أَعْجَزَهُ ذَلِكَ, it would not have been difficult for him. By the way, one last thing I will say here is another great wisdom. We can talk about the wisdom sort of the whole time. Is that some of these answers that these scholars give, these fatwa, these opinions they have, are not necessarily right and wrong. They can sometimes be right and right, just in different contexts. And that is of the reason some scholars said, why those rulings came speculative, or those evidences came speculative, because Allah knew they would need a different interpretation for another place or another time. Right? I'm going to resist the protest example because that's a can of worms. Any question? You had, I'm sorry. Quick. 1, 2, 3, quick. Next slide so we can pressure them.
Is it possible for the scholars to agree on something definitive at one point in time, and then that will change?
To agree on something, and then once you agree, it's over. They can disagree later on an application of it, right? But no, because it would be a definitive, timeless position once an ijma' is reached, right? So if you look deeply into the issue, you investigate it deeper, once you're qualified to do so, you'll realize they disagreed later on something based on it, an extension of it, an application of it, but not it. Right? Agreement, not majority, agreement. Not four madhabs, agreement. Everybody. All of the scholars of a particular era on a particular issue at a point in time. Right? Quick. But we're going to have to fight a lot of people who are not told that we're going to delay Isha tonight. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just asked this question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, about the Madhabs.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, wait a second. Sisters, anything quickly? Okay. A little bit of history is helpful.
Is it like the majority of scholars agree, and there's like a minority?
No, all of them. And that is why Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says that the ijma's have layers, and Ibn Hazm has a book called Maratib al-Ijma', and the ijma' of the Sahaba is the strongest ijma'. After the Sahaba, the wiggle room, it's not sort of free-for-all, but the wiggle room does widen after the generation of the Sahaba. He calls that ijma' qat'i, definitive ijma', whereas later it's speculative ijma'. Doesn't mean you can override it, you can't trample it, but you would have to find precedent first before you operate it, you operationalize it. Make sense? You can't just from your own say, I'm going to be the first. That's the idea. So the fiqh schools rising. Basically, in Islamic history, the schools of fiqh, of sort of understanding, they arose in different places. There was like strongholds of Islamic learning. One of them was Kufa, Kufan schools from Kufa, Iraq, a place in Iraq, and they were known as Ahlul Ra'i. Basically, Ra'i, opinion, rationale, these are the rationalists. Okay? In fiqh, the rationalists in theology are, again, in fiqh we're talking about. Please stay with me. And those who championed this school, founded and championed this school, was Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and his two famous great disciples, Muhammad ibn Yusuf al-Shaybani and Abu Yusuf al-Qadi. Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn Hassan. These are the two most famous students of Abu Hanifa who sort of founded his madhab, basically, founded his school. The other school is known as the Medinan school or Ahlul Hadith. Careful. Ahlul Hadith means they're usually called, in English, the textualists. Hadith is like the text, right, that are transmitted from the Prophet. The textualists. That's what they are called, right? And those who championed this were Malik, because Malik was in Medina, and the Shafi'i, because he was a student of Malik, though he went to Iraq and Egypt, and Imam Ahmad, because also he was a student of the Shafi'i, to the end of it. And so, does this mean sort of the Medinan school did not accept rationale and fiqh? Absolutely not. Because remember I told you the agreed upon proofs, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and Qiyas. Qiyas is rationalization. Does this match, right? Or not? And all of them have rational proofs later. There's like the textual proofs and there's the rational proofs. That's what actually makes the difference between the madhahib. Right? It's sort of the secondary sources, not the primary that we already discussed, the secondary that we will not have time to discuss. But I will give you some examples of it. Every single school has instances when its rule book makes it look like it's more rationalist than textualist, right? Like it's not as letter of the law as much as it is sort of big picture spirit of the law. And every school has positions, including them. where they seem more letter of the law, I don't care, even though, no, but it's the hadith is, right? And so just keep that in mind. And even the Sahaba had this, by the way, guys. Like, how protective the Sahaba were with every letter the Prophet spoke, alayhi salatu wasalam, and what it meant exactly and what it didn't mean. They also employed their rationale. Like Umar radiallahu an stopped giving disbelievers from the spoils of war. He did, because he believed, even though the Prophet did this, he did this for a certain reason that no longer stands. He was basically trying to get them past their prejudice so they would look into Islam for their own good. It's not a bribe, right? It's trying to help them get past their reasons not to look into Islam. Or Umar now says that Islam is strong now and they have many different reasons to become Muslims, so I don't need to give them from the spoils anymore. He's not overturning the Sharia, right? He's saying what the Prophet did, alayhi salatu wasalam, was a different context than what my context. Uthman himself, radiallahu anh, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked about stray camels, he said, ما لك ولها معها ماؤها حافرها وخفها وماؤها حتى يأتيها ربها. Like, mind your business, leave it alone, don't pick up the stray camel. What business do you have sort of grabbing the camel? It has with it its water and its hoof. Meaning it can drink for a while, it's not going to die. And it has its hoof. It's not like a lamb. The wolf ain't going to get it. It's going to kick the wolf to death. Right? So it has its sort of water and its protection until its master, Rabbuha means its owner, comes back. Just leave it alone. Right? Uthman stopped that, radiallahu anhu, in his era, when he became Khalifa. Why? Because he saw like Medina growing and becoming a cosmopolitan city, and not everyone was familiar with everyone. It's not as trustworthy of like a small town place anymore. And he saw this, right? Bigger and less trustworthy and otherwise. He said, no, we're going to have to tell people, hold the camel until the owner comes. Because we don't know who's coming in and out of town. Like, it became the center of the Muslim Ummah, right? Until it moved to Kufa. Medina was that. So the idea is he's not suspending the Prophet's Sharia. He's saying the Prophet was saying the likelihood is very high that it's going to survive and be found and not stolen. I'm saying right now, we wish the times were as they were once. That's all. You get it? So this rationale, like, is not like a one group or not at all. And likewise with the hadith, he thinks like Abu Hanifa rahimahullah would have any sort of disregard for hadith. Whoever says this has a huge misunderstanding of how that works. Next slide. I actually wanted to give you guys like an example of each madhab, going rationalist and textualist, but I'm not going to have time to do that. And of course, none of you can see what this says. So let me try. But memorize this, take a picture of it, put it on Instagram without my face. This is very important. Just you guys are actually listening to me. Oh my God. I never felt so powerful. Oversimplifying the madhahib, the schools of fiqh, into rational versus textual is tempting for any layman. Oh, these guys are the rationalists. Oh, these guys are literalists, right? It's tempting because when you don't know something well, you just want a black and white answer, right? It is very tempting. It's very convenient if you don't want to study. You don't want to put in the work. He said, but that's not true. Historically, that's not how they operated. And if you ask them, what are your rules? What is your method for arriving at rulings? It's not true either, even until today. And it's like really hard to count the examples of this. You got to always remember. See, I'm just like haymakering right now. Number one, they all took from the same sources, primary sources. Okay? And I'll come to that in another slide. Number two, these madhahib they had a method. They were trying to be honest and principled and sincere and objective and impartial in following their method, which they believed was most aligned with Quran and Sunnah. That's what they were trying to do. Like the madhab also is not just like some set of fatwas, set of ideas. No, it's like a formula, like an algorithm, like an infrastructure, usul. That's what makes the madhab different, and that has survived also the test of time. It's been able to answer every question, even the newly emerging issues until now. And that's why people say, I don't want to follow a madhab. Like, okay, no problem. Create your own madhab. Let's see how much utility, how many people will accept it, see value in it in 10 years, 10 generations, 20 generations. That's what these madhahib are. They're all founded in Quran and Sunnah and have actually shown that they are, to a certain extent, as viable timelessly as the Quran and Sunnah for the newly emerging issues about which the Quran and Sunnah didn't give us definitive answers. Is that clear? Okay. Here's another cool thing I want to do for you. It's okay, it's okay. I'll use without a mic. Is this going to work? It's not going to work. I should just send you guys this. It's not mine. I think Mufti Muntasir, Muntasir, put this together. Long story short, this is like Medina and Kufa, right? So Medina, this doesn't even show here, but I know what he's talking about. You have Aisha, Umar, radiallahu anhuma, among others. I mean, there's Abu Hurairah, radiallahu an, Abdullah ibn Umar. These are like the fuqaha, the jurists, those who are specialized in law in Medina, of the Sahaba. And then you have Kufa, Iraq. You have Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu an, of course, who moved the Muslim capital to Iraq. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who settled in Iraq, and he's one of the greatest scholars from the Sahaba that settled in Iraq. It is sort of, you're going to get down here to Imam Ahmad, and Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Malik. Remember I told you the teachers are one of another? It is difficult to find a fatwa in their madhahib that does not stem from one of these four Sahaba. Okay? And in the Hanafi madhab, this is like, let's say the Ra'i line, rationalist line, the Hanafi line, it is difficult for you to find a fatwa that is not attributed to who? Ali ibn Mas'ud. Look at how principled they were, right? Because that was a part of all of their principles. Quran, Sunnah, authority of the Sahaba as well. So every one of them has a Sahabi standing behind him. He's like surrounded by giants, right? And so that was of their, how sophisticated the methodology was. What's also very interesting here, once again, no time, I'm so sorry. All of the 6 books of hadith, the most famous sort of compilers of hadith, are all either teachers or students or peers of the 4 imams. All of them. And their teachers. So a Shafi'i, for example, his teacher is one of his teachers, they had hundreds of teachers, was Waki' ibn Jarrah, one of those famous teachers, right? Imam al-Bukhari, Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, was sort of like a contemporary Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. And Imam Muslim was with a student of al-Bukhari. It's all interconnected. There's no interruption in the train. And this is something the nations of the world have all, when objectively studying our history and the reliability of our history and the preservation of our scripture and tradition, admire us and envy us for. Keep that in mind. I think I kept, oh yes, see? I did. Can you get the next slide? There is a simpler one. So here's just fun facts. This is a Yaqeen graphic. One of us at Yaqeen put this together so you can look it up. It's a simplification of the one before it. But this is all a further simplification. Muslim was the student of Bukhari. Bukhari was a student of Ahmad. Ahmad was a student of Shafi'i. Alhamdulillah, I forgot about this. Shafi'i was a student of Malik. This is an oversimplification, but it's just simple, good enough. Malik was a student of Nafi'. This is the Medinan school. Nafi' was the student of Nafi', right? And Nafi' was the student of Al-A'raj, and Al-A'raj was the student of Abu Hurairah and Ibn Umar. Abu Hurairah, radiallahu anhu, and Abu Hurairah, of course, was the great companion of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Just to show you, right? These golden chains. We have one more slide, I think, before we close. I think. I'm very sorry, everybody. I did a huge disservice to this. So why are the all 4 valid? Because they agree on the primary sources, and because they're allowed to disagree on the secondary sources. Right? So what does that mean? Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he would have this preference for what people in Medina are doing. That's one of his principles. Over a hadith that is solitary, has like a thin chain. It's not weak, but thin. Right? Al-Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, would say if the hadith has weakness to it, and there's a strong chain to the companion, the fatwa of the companion is superior to the weak hadith. Not the authentic, but the weak hadith. Another scholar will come and say, no, my rule is I believe a weak hadith should be given more weight than the statement of a companion. These are usul, these are principles that they lived by. So that leads to what? 1,001 different answers. Because I'm committed, I'm consistent, I'm true to the principles I was convinced of. And so that's the examples of the secondary sources. The last thing here is, I said veracity over time, so I won't touch it. This is basically the thing you want to remember about why any 2 scholars differ. Okay? Because they differ, number one, about what was said. You know, people always try to say, you know, the scholars were wrong, as if we can actually prove that. If they're challenged on it, they can't prove it. Because they didn't know the hadith. You're assuming also they didn't know the hadith. You know, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, when he has his book called Removing Blame from the Great Scholars, he mentions 10 reasons why scholars differ. He says not knowing the hadith is the least common of all of the 10. These great scholars have said, no. They usually knew the hadith, but they disagreed on whether it was authentic or not, or what it actually meant. Right? So what was said, authentic or not? Quran is done. But even with the Quran, what was meant now? The linguistic discussion, the principles we're going to employ here, right? What was meant? And even if we're going to agree on what was said and what was meant by it, but how do you reconcile it now with something else that was said? With something else that was said. So I'll give you 2 examples, and then I'll go to the final slide so I don't tempt myself into giving more examples. This is what is worthier, by the way, a lot of times than even my explanation. A lot of times we speak about these great imams. For example, the 4 imams, these are just symbols for me. They're not supposed to make sense to you. We speak about them as just placeholders. There's a guy named Abu Hanifa, and a guy named Malik, and a guy named Shafi'i, and some guy named Ahmad, rahimahumullah, right? If you were to avail yourself, even before understanding any of their methodologies, avail yourself their biographies, you will understand you're in front of something different here. And that you were truly unfair to people that were not prophets, but were more diligent and dedicated to identifying the positions that the Prophet would have given in their assumption than we could ever be, even if we were given the lifetime of Nuh alayhi salam. Even if we were given 1,000 years on earth. Really. And like the sacrifice, the devotion, the sincerity, the refusal of power, the refusal of status, the changing of their views 6, 7 times. You know how hard that is when everyone thinks you're a big guy and sort of like they're challenging you on it and you keep saying, actually I was wrong. Wait, I was wrong again. Actually I was wrong another time. Right? And you keep going. These things are not easy. Anyway, so just please avail yourselves of their biographies wherever you can. But I'll give you 2 quick examples that people usually can appreciate. They'll all agree that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ahya ardan mawatan fahiya lah." Pretty clear what this means, what was said, authenticity-wise. Whomever gives life, revives a barren land, it belongs to them. The Prophet ﷺ said this. What does this mean? Does that mean I can go squatter style? Well, squatters actually are on people's lands all that times, right? What does that mean? What does it mean I've given life to a land, right? And does that mean it's automatic? Some scholars said it's automatic. You go and sort of you revive some land that's under nobody's jurisdiction, belongs to you. Others said no. The Prophet ﷺ intended by that to address the rulers. That if someone comes to you proving he had done this, give them the land. Because if it's not addressing the rulers, it becomes a free-for-all, and Islam would never legislate chaos. So these are 2 rational understandings. So they're both quoting the same hadith. The second example of this is when Hind bint Utbah came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said to him, Abu Sufyan, my husband is a very stingy man. He doesn't spend on me, he doesn't spend on the kids. So what should I do? So the Prophet ﷺ said, brothers, close your ears. Actually, sisters, close your ears. The Prophet ﷺ said, خُذِي مِن مَالِهِ مَا يَكْفِيكِ وَوَلَدَكِ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Take from his wealth what will suffice you and your child within reasonability. So now, was this a fatwa or was this a judicial verdict? Makes a difference. If it's like an Islamic ruling, that means no woman ever has to fact check with a scholar or a judge about whether this applies to me, just like, this is an open source fatwa. If it's a judicial verdict, it means the judge, which I am acting in his place, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right now, has the right to say, go do it. In other words, is it a 1-step process? No, the hadith apply it? Or is it a 2-step process? The scholars actually differed on this. Was he addressing the people or was he addressing the judges? The same way with the barren land. Was he addressing the people or was he addressing the governors, the rulers? Same exact hadith. Right? And so the reason why they took two different positions, there's a whole host of evidences that you cannot even begin to understand, let alone compare and contrast. That's why they differ. You know, my teacher, and I promise you, khalas, I'm done. Dr. Hatim al-Hajj said to me once, I was sitting on his couch once with him in his house. And he said to me, Muhammad, we were so bad. We were narcissists. I was like, what do you mean, Sheikh? He said, we sat there talking about the stronger view and the weaker view and giving an hour lecture on this stuff, right? I think the example he was thinking of was hands first or knees first, going down into sujood. Like he said, like, you know, I build myself up. I can literally speak on this for an hour and a half. He was talking about like in his 20s, right? And then you fast forward in life and you realize that these scholars on both sides had based their positions on sciences, like sub-sciences of fiqh, right? Sciences that we haven't even heard of yet, let alone mastered. Right? Just how arrogant can I be? And so, just keep that in mind. If it's a closed door, it's a closed door for everybody, scholar or not scholar. Matters of ijma'. If it's not a closed door, it doesn't mean you're allowed to enter it. Know your place. You're only allowed in the courtyard right now. You can ask those inside to let you know what applies to you. Jazakallah khairan, and forgive me again. Sallallahu sallam wa baraka nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I'll hang out after Isha. For whoever wants to sort of convene over questions, fight me about anything, you can arm wrestle later. But we need to pray now, inshallah, azza wa jal first. Barakallahu feekum. Dang, Mazin. That was a train wreck, man. It needed a part two. Habibi. You know what I was thinking about today? I was thinking about all the things I said about Hajar alayhi salam. And I remember, oh my God. It's just so funny. I was just like, because it happened an hour apart. It's like, Fahd, just call out, man. Correct me. It was so messy. Alhamdulillah. How you been? Huh?
Is it very...
Okay.
You remember what?